to implement the resolution that I put forward about a month ago. And that resolution calls on the government to reform the legislation that's in place today that gives the powers, the policing powers to the OSPCA that it has today in conjunction with its responsibilities to provide shelter. I believe fundamentally that what has happened in Newmarket is a strong example of why that legislation is fundamentally flawed.
Amen.
We cannot empower an organization such as the OSPCA with inspection and enforcement powers, with rights of entry, in fact, to lay charges, criminal charges, and ask that same organization to, at the same time, be responsible for providing shelter for defenseless animals. That is a fundamental change that must take place. And beyond that, equally as important, that the provincial government, through the Ministry of Community Safety, is given authority for oversight of the OSPCA and any organization dealing with animal welfare. Let me share with you what happened on that morning when I was informed through the media, in the same way probably that you were, that all of the animals at the Newmarket shelter had been sentenced to death by the OSPCA that has a responsibility for animal welfare and for looking after those animals. When I found out about that, there was just something that immediately reacted within me to say something is fundamentally wrong.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out. You know, I'm going to be here for the G20 demonstration as well. There is actually some similarities between the two, because part of the problem behind both and part of the demand for a demonstration is in front of us here at Queen's Park. And quite rightly, my colleague Frank Cleese said, this is not the house of Dalton McGuinty, this is your house. This is our house. Queen's Park belongs to us. Yes. And that's first and foremost that we need to assert. Queen's Park belongs to us. Now, in terms of a commercial announcement, I'd like to give one. Tonight at the El Macombo, after 9 o'clock, there are going to be bans against breed-specific legislation. Let's hear it for that. So after your day in the warm sun defending the rights of humans and animals, please come down and party with us at the El Macombo. It's for a good cause. Talking about a good cause, my good cause is here. Her name is Victoria. She's a bull terrier. She meets the definition of a pit bull, the way the law is written. But you know, and I know, that Dalton McGuinty will never break down at the door of the owner of Blue and take Blue from Don Cherry. But Dalton McGuinty will take a beagle out of a home of an older lady. Will take a dog that's a boxer mix called Rambo out of the backyard of a woman in Brampton. Dalton McGuinty will do that because Dalton McGuinty thinks he can get away with it. And we're going to say no. You can't get away with that. No search and seizure without a warrant.
That's right.
For anyone, animal or human. For anyone. The other thing we're here to say, and this starts way back. I remember sitting when the bill that gave sweeping powers to the OSPCA was passed. We brought in numerous amendments. We heard deputations against it across the province. All were ignored. All were ignored. This is the result. I didn't think that the term S, which is supposed to be for society, stood for security. I didn't think CA stood for cruelty to animals. And that's what it's come to stand for. I didn't think the P in OSPCA stood for policing. That's what it's come to stand for, and we have to say no. Absolutely no. Shameful. This is the organization that's supposed to be looking after our animals. The government has given it a mandate, and the government has given it your tax dollars. And yet the government says in Ontario that it refuses to have oversight. It refuses to have an inquiry, refuses to look at the actual running of the OSPCA. Despite the deaths of over 100 animals in Newmarket, every single death of those animals is a crime. It's a shame. This should not be happening with a society that is deemed to look after our animals. Absolutely not. And you heard Frank say it best. We need you. We need you to sign this petition. This calls for oversight. It calls for the government to do what the government should be doing. It calls for Rick Bartolucci to do what Rick Bartolucci should be doing, and that is to have oversight over the organization that has oversight over our animals. The fact that they say they don't is absolutely shameful. This is absolutely unacceptable. Is this a rogue agency, or is this an agency that acts and responds to the people, to our House, and to supposedly our government, or not? We've got to take OSPCA back. OSPCA should belong to Ontario. That's who it should belong to. That's what the name says. So I certainly urge all of you to please sign this petition. There was no reason for those animals to die. They died because they had ringworm. Think about it, my friends. Ringworm, a totally treatable disease, in a shelter that was supposed to be a shelter for them, was supposed to look after them, was supposed to care for them. And each one of those animals represents a family, perhaps some children, perhaps some seniors, all who now have lost a companion, a friend, a pet. For what? For a treatable disease. And if they wanted, the OSPCA could come and arrest and take your dog as a potentially dangerous dog, and you would have to fight to get it back, pay for its board and keep at an extraordinary and outrageous rate, and perhaps not get it back at all. That's how broad and sweeping this law is, and how ridiculous. As I've said, the breed-specific legislation at Queen's Park describes every male politician at Queen's Park, except for having a long, skinny tail, which I don't know because they wear trousers. So that's how broad the legislation is. Let's change it, let's can it, and please, let's call for oversight of OSPCA. Thank you so much.
As he lay dying. 10 counts of animal cruelty were laid against the kennel owner. She spent $45,000 to defend herself. Although repeatedly threatened by the OSPCA, I was never charged. Halfway through the trial, the OSPCA suddenly and inexplicably withdrew all charges. Although we felt incredible relief at the time, I realize now we were cheated of the opportunity to publicly testify as to the OSPCA's abuse of enforcement powers, their arrogance, threats, and bullying, and their astonishing lack of investigative skills. Months later, completely by fluke, I stumbled across a story called The Limping Pig. Wendell Palmer had an 800-pound boar named Jack on his Niagara Falls farm.